I am proud of being the batch of 92-94, and that batch was taught by these eminent professors. So I feel very proud. Before going into details, I would simply hand over to the Professor Praveen Jha to carry out the session. Thank you.
So welcome everyone to the Golden Jubilee celebration of the Center for Economic Studies and Planning. On behalf of all current students and faculty of CESP, alumni who are present here, as well as those who could not be here in person, the larger JNU community, and all our well-wishers from across the globe, warmest greetings to our dearest professors. We really feel hugely privileged that they are able to participate in this session. Professor Sunanda Sen, Professor Amit Bhaduri, Professor Anjan Mukherjee, Professor Utsa Patnaik, Professor Prabhat Patnaik, Professor Deepak Nayyar, who will join us shortly, Professor Sen Gupta, who is already online, Professor Satish Jain, also online, Professor Arun Kumar, Professor Jayati Ghosh, who is also waiting online, Professor Dhar, he might join us. We are immensely grateful to you for gracing this occasion. Professor Chandrasekhar, as it happens, his flight got rescheduled and he's on a plane right now and has, of course, regretted his inability to be part of this particular event. In our audience, among others, we have students representing almost every batch during the last half a century of CSP. Now, which reflects this massive and huge bonding with the center. And a major reason for it is all of you professors. Many of the most recent batches are simply excited to see you in person. After this event. In my association of almost 4 decades with all of you, a little more with some, a little less with some, I cherish you not only as outstanding scholars, which is globally acknowledged, or for your intellectually stimulating, scintillating lectures, but as teachers in the finest sense of the term, teaching us how to engage critically with our discipline and taking great care of us. All those who were privileged to learn from them, be in their classes, be their research students, will vouch for the kind of complete care that they provided. Equally importantly, we cherish your remarkable contributions as institution builders. Without you and others like you, when the university was envisioned and in its early days of the journey, JNU would not have acquired the kind of academic prestige and stature that it did in a very short period. It was a remarkable achievement. So, my imams and sirs, welcome again to join here for this conversation. It would be lovely to hear from you, your reflections, reminiscences, on building this center, the challenges you had to confront, the excitements that you shared with each other, your assessment of where we are today, and any ideas as to how to navigate the days ahead. Of course, most importantly, it is your session. It is your conversation. So whatever you may like to reflect on is most welcome as we celebrate the Golden Jubilee of the Center, of which you have been amongst the most important architects, along with few of our teachers who left us at different points in time. Some of us are no more, some of us are in other places, but it is indeed a privilege to stand here to celebrate these absolutely outstanding scholars. We have about 3 hours or so of this session. If it is okay with you, may I request you to take about 12 to 15 minutes each. And then if we have a few minutes, we can have a little bit of interaction. It would be very little, of course, given the constraints of time. But let me now welcome our distinguished faculty. We'll start with Professor Sunanda Sen.
It's very difficult to express how happy I am feeling to be able to attend this wonderful ceremony of Golden Jubilee. Yeah, sure. Well, it's remarkable the way it has been organized, and I consider myself very fortunate to be able to come here in person and meet so many of you from different parts of the country, from different batches, and with so much of warmth and cordiality amongst all of us. Right? I don't know what I'll tell you, but maybe since we were there when the center started. I just recalled one or two, not too many, occasions which are still very clear, very prominent in my memory. One was when we started, the 6 of us, and Krishna was there to help us to initiate most of the things which were happening. So one day she said, I think my colleagues who were with me, they will also remember. Krishna said, well, there is no book in the library on economics as such, which we need. We said, yes, what to do? Then she said, why don't we go? We, the only transport in our group was one car, which was owned by Krishna Bharadwaj. So some of us, came with her. We went to North Delhi, to Ansari Nagar or something, and we got a few books, right? So that was the beginning. We got a few books. Whoever, we asked each other, what do you want? What would you want in your courses and so on. So we just collected some books. Then, we come back and, of course, the teaching starts very soon. There was hardly any time, and the courses were completely reoriented for each one of us individually. I was teaching in another university, but that was in a different setup in Jadavpur and so on. And others also came from other different places. But anyway, the orientation here was different. We used to discuss it very often sitting together. So the courses started, we made the course outlines, we discussed with each other, and then, it was going on very smoothly. And of course, we enjoyed so much the company of the colleagues, and the company of the young colleagues, of course, and the company of the students who joined from different disciplines, science and various other disciplines, but they all came with the intention to continue in economics. Now, two more incidents, very briefly I'll tell you. Then one day, we were told that Ministry of Finance is disposing of their archives, and are we interested? Then some of us said, yes, of course. Economic history is so very important, and if we get them free. So I still remember Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa and me and maybe some more. We went and we sort of, we climbed, not myself, but Prabhat did most of the job. Climbed up and down to collect the books, huge, parliamentary papers and various other things. So we got the basics of our archive. And not only that, we put them together. So one of those days, the library in a corner, one small room which was still vacant. And I come, and I find, what's happening here? I find Jayati and some others, they're breaking a coconut. They said, oh, it's a beginning, it's a opening of our library. So, the books are kept there and so on and so forth. So, lovely memories, wonderful memories. And of course, I myself used those books, I'm sure Utsa also did. And they were very, very, very useful stuff. So anyway, it went on, and it has completed, the center has completed 50 long years, and it had, ups and downs, hurdles, but it has continued. That is the most I really cherish, I really appreciate. And thank you all for inviting us. And thank you all for coming here, and it's wonderful meeting all of you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your reflections. Now may I please request Professor Anjan Mukherjee to share his thoughts. Yes, sir, please. Can you hear me, all of you? Yeah. Yes, sir. I have to stand because I've never sat down and spoken. It's great to see all of you, and thank you, Praveen and Shakti and the rest of you who've, Rohit was somewhere around. Oh, he's there in the background. You see, let me try to, I thought of what to say. So I thought maybe one should start at the beginning and then slowly work my way through. And Praveen, just raise a hand and say that I've said enough, right? Don't give me that. Get bored. But anyway, 16th April 1973 was the day that I joined.
Strangely, that day is very clear in my memory. I remember exactly what happened. The day I retired is not so very clear in my memory. 31st July, I know the date because that was my birthday. I attained 65 and that was it. But I really don't know what I did that day. So let me begin by what happened 16 April 1973. I came to JNU. This campus didn't exist. It was what we called the down campus. You all have been into that campus, right? So there was no CESP at that time. Only Krishna Bhardwaj was there, but she was in CPS. So I wanted to know what to do, and they said, you go meet her. So there was a faculty meeting of the Center for Political Studies going on, and Professor Krishna Bhardwaj was inside. So I sent a slip in saying that, look, I'm Anjan Mukherjee. I didn't know her. I had not met her before. So this lady came out and she said, come, let's try to get you a room. And then along with, at that time, the Dean of the School of Social Sciences was Professor Rashiduddin Khan. So he also came out just to see who was interrupting the proceedings and so on. And then there was a room, but there was no furniture, so someone had to go get a table, and I had a chair which kept disappearing every day when I would come. The chair had disappeared. So that's how the thing began. Then later on in the year, we shifted to, we had offices. By the way, I think we were the only faculty of economics which had offices with attached toilets. That was really a great thing. And they were the first set of offices that we had was on a block where it was only partial. The rest of the block was occupied by the School of Languages. And the joke that went around, and some of our students of the earlier batches told us, do you know why CESP is located in the School of Languages? And the answer was that because they teach Greek there. So I thought that was a good one. And we went from there till finally to the campus that we now have. Lots of things. So let me tell you about some stray incidents that. So originally we were only 6, right? So you see 4 of us, and Professor Bhaduri is online, and Professor Bhardwaj, unfortunately, is no more. Then I think the first 2 editions, amongst the first 2 editions, one who stayed for very long was Omol Shanab. So one day when he joined, Omol was fresh out of Delhi University. I was given that, I took it upon myself to take him to the library, to introduce him to the librarian, to get cards. So I went there with Omol, and I said that, please give him some cards. So the person at the counter said, but he doesn't need additional cards, he can borrow on your cards. So I said, what do you mean? He said, I thought he was your son. So I said, Amol was very young. Incidentally, I was young too. For them to have thought that Amol was my son, Amol never let me live it down actually, but it was crazy actually. So, anyway, then slowly I think you can see how the center grew. We always had a problem about who was going to teach statistics and econometrics and stuff like that. And Amit Bhaduri, as I called him, told me that, look, why can't you look for someone? So I used to go teach at ISI those days. ISI used to be in Yojana Bhavan those days. And I used to give some lectures in Yojana Bhavan top floor. It's a very funny building. I don't know whether people have gone. You see the first few floors, beautifully carpeted. Because that was when you went to the members of the planning commission. But then as you went up, the carpets disappeared and the usual ramshackle government offices. So anyway, I used to go there. So one of the professors there, Professor Chetty, he's the father of Raj Chetty. Raj Chetty, all of you must have heard of, probably one of the most famous young economists in the country today, in the US today. So I said, Chetty, look, we need someone. Don't you have a student finishing or something? He said, yeah, DN is finishing. So I went and met DN. Then I realized that DN was sitting in one of the courses that I was teaching. So, and I hurried back and told Amit that, look, there's this guy Chetty was telling me about, DN Rao. So that was the entry of DN into. But DN was actually a bit older than me, because you see, DN had a career in mathematics. He used to teach mathematics, I believe. When Prabhat was a student, DN was there. So I listened to the chairman, he has waved his arm, so I'll cut it short. There are many more stories, if I have time I'll tell you. But it has been a great rollicking life, and I'm glad to see that this is what we tried to build. Yes, I think he was teaching at CESP. This is heckling actually. Anyway, so I like teaching. What I hated was grading. Grading is I'll let me tell you. And the unfortunate thing is, it is the students who remember the grades. I don't. So I've run into students, and today lots of people I don't generally meet that often. So nowadays it doesn't really come to me, but earlier on I used to think, now, is he going to throw a brickbat or something? But fortunately all of you have been very kind, because amongst students, and again this is something, the two of the toughest graders, or I shouldn't say toughest, I should say the ones who gave the least grades are there today. You know who we are talking about. So the point was that one knew that students were trying. They came to us with a lot of different backgrounds. Some things were easy, some things were not. And we couldn't make everything easy. Yes, I told once that, well, the easiest thing would be if I start A, B, C, D. Well, that's not the point, right? I mean, I have to teach you something which is an advancement of what you have been taught earlier. But the funniest things used to happen when we interviewed students. You see, there was a time when we used to interview students even for the MA. Amongst the first, I only see Shravan here. Yeah, but there's no one else, right, from the first batch. Well, the first batch, the selection was also quite something. Because Prabhat and Utsa had not yet joined, and Sunanda Sen also. So there was only 3 of us. And meanwhile, admissions had to take place. Signal? Anyway, so we to cut it short, but questions were asked. Now, one of the things that we did, and I think in some sense, if at least my impression is, and I think Prabhat, Utsa and Sunanda Sen would bear me out, that the students who came, although they came, didn't all come from Calcutta, or there were a large number of people from Calcutta although. In fact, in JNU, there was a question in Parliament to G. Parsarthi, who was then saying that you are only taking Tamils into your university, and G. Parsarthi wrote back and said, not true. There are a larger number of Bengalis here. So that's how he regarded himself. But I think the group was a lot more homogeneous. And you see, interviews are tough things. You walk into a room, there are 4 or 5 people sitting there, they start firing questions. Now, we have no clue as to what you have been taught. So our first thing was that, what do you know? What would you like us to ask? Now that often led to various funny situations. But anyway, I go on, the 40 odd years that I taught, so there'll be many such. But fortunately, for such stories to develop, our system changed in 82 or 83. And it changed with, I think, 2 of the people who caused us to change are sitting here, as I can see them. Both Mrityunjay and Shomojit, because that is the batch which created a lot of... The results were not announced in time. That was... They didn't do anything, no. You were very innocent people. So basically, things changed. I think it was tough for us. It was really tough because we were getting larger and larger students. Then my colleague Satish had joined. He's there, I think, online somewhere. And Satish, we had to give written examinations. And Satish had developed one question which he said, if you set that one question and just look at only those who answer that question, then you get the best students out of that cohort. And that is something that people would know. And he tested it out. So it is, as economics is done on evidence which is presented, we did it once. So what was that question? The question was, give your answer correct to the second decimal point. and there was two fractions, lots of decimals and stuff, both numerator and denominator. Now there were things which would cancel out very easily. It would take just, there were things like 9, 27 and so on. So things would just cancel out, but you would be careful about the decimals. And then the second decimal point. Out of 1500 that year, only 83 answered that correct, and all those 83 were the top students in that batch. So we said we don't need to ask any questions, just you can feed it in, but of course that would not go, right? And we went along. We had students who found the courses easy, found the courses tough. They went and did great things outside. And here you are. And I'm not saying that all of you, a large number, I think that statistic someone should pick up is how many of our former students are in the academic profession, where they teach. Not for any reason except just to show that this is where our contribution perhaps has been the greatest. Or maybe that's where we could be faulted to also, actually. But it has been that, and we enjoy doing it. Some things we could have done better, surely, of course. Several discussions, debates and stuff that used to happen within the center attest to that. But then of course you can do things better. There's no doubt about that. But at least that we have done this, at least I think we can pat ourselves on the back. Thank you all.
Professor Jayati Ghosh, who is online and has to catch a flight very soon, will request her to now join. Professor Jayati Ghosh.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Welcome.
I really feel bad that I'm not able to be with you all here. It's quite something. So thank you for putting this together. I was listening to Sunanda and Anjan, and I'm one of those fortunate people who actually was a student here and then subsequently taught here as well. So I feel that it is one institution that has shaped my life with CESP. I wish I could tell the rest of you just what kind of incredible atmosphere there was when I first joined as a student. It was such a vibrant, lively, there was such a sense of excitement about ideas. I've never really experienced that before. So this was a dominantly young faculty, and they were all really passionate, very engaged, very interested. Some of them would attend each other's classes because they were giving ideas that were being presented in the class. And it was absolutely heady. It was really something that I don't think I had come across anywhere in the world subsequently. So we were very privileged, I think, in those early years to have that incredible experience. And then, of course, I was also lucky enough. I went to study abroad and I came back and I was lucky enough to get a job here. So the thing about CESP, I think, and as Anjan said, there have been so many different phases and different experiences and good times, bad times. But the sense it always gave me is it is a family with all the warts, okay? I am recognizing that families have problems and that sense so on and so forth. But it had that deep sense of commitment, engagement, that somehow you are all part of this whole. That went well beyond the academic, which is why I feel that, of course, academically it changes you, I do believe, and I hope it still does. I think it still does. I think academically it does certainly to me, but I think it changed pretty much everyone I've seen. But CSP changed you in other ways, I think. It changes people in different ways. And I've seen students coming in, and I've seen them when they finish the MA and also when they finish the PhD. And so they're very different in largely, mostly good ways, which is, I think, amazing. And I don't know if that's only the faculty. In fact, I know it's not only the faculty. I think it is really the students themselves who over the years have created this kind of culture that somehow you kind of pass on to the next lot. Even when you have generation gap conflicts between the first years and the second year, there's some deep sense of a CSP identity, some kind of common values of its kinds. It's true, there are exceptions, but I think broadly this has been one of the extraordinary features of CSP. I have my own library story, like Anjan does. Mine is perhaps even a bit more down on me. So I had gone to renew my own library card. So I think I was in my early 40s actually. So I went there and said, "Abhi kyun aaye hain? Dopahr ko aana tha." Because in fact students had to get theirs done in the afternoon, and the faculty was allowed to do it in the morning. So I produced this blue card and said, "Nahi, main to faculty hu." So I was actually feeling very delighted. I said, "Wow, I'm 40 and he still thinks I'm a student." And so he said, "Pehle kyun nahi bataya? They said they student hai." We also have students who have been around for a very long time, and most of them actually eventually finished, which was also delightful. So I think the ability of CSP to create people who, even if you leave CSP doesn't leave you, you carry it with you. And to become the pull that enables others to come back, finish their thesis, do things, and of course, so many of you are doing great things out there in different ways, that's also wonderful to see. Yeah, I think it's special. And this I say now, having experienced many different academic environments. I don't know how it became so completely unique and special, but it's very exciting to think that it can still remain special. So thank you all so much for being part of it.
Thank you so much. So now we move to Professor Deepak Nayyar, who actually was caught up with you want, all right, okay. So Professor Utsa Patnaik then. Then Professor Prabhat Patnaik.
Like Anjan, I also prefer the idea of standing when speaking. First of all, thank you very much. I am overwhelmed because on occasions like this, it is common to forget the older people, as actually happened with Kapil Dev in the World Cup final. It is 50 years of CSP, but I really feel like yesterday, Krishna Bharadwaj coming to our house in Cambridge, those days we were located there, and telling us that she is starting this center, whether we would like to join it, and discussing the difficulties in starting the center, and also giving us an idea of the course structure which they had thought up here, those who were here. The difficulty arose from the fact that in JNU those days you had two different schools of thought. One was of the view that all centers should be interdisciplinary, which is why you actually had a center called Political Development, of which Krishna herself was a faculty member. The other said that you cannot be multidisciplinary unless you are firmly rooted in one discipline. And on that basis, the History Center had already started. and Krishna wanted to start CESP, and of course there was a lot of opposition to it, saying that the university is deviating from the philosophy on the basis of which it had been started, which was actually multidisciplinarity. Well, finally Krishna won the day thanks to the support she got from Jayati Ghosh, and the CESP was formed, and then we all came here. After the CESP was formed, teaching MA, when the MA students passed out, then they demanded that there should be a postgraduate program in CESP. So they even threatened to go on strike. People like Chandru and all these people threatened to go on strike if we did not start a PhD. So finally we started a PhD. Then after some time, there was a demand that an MPhil should be started. And in fact, I remember the then Vice Chancellor or acting Vice Chancellor, I'm forgetting exactly what he was at that time, P.N. Srivastav, in an academic council meeting saying that university must have a uniform structure. Everywhere else you have got MA, MPhil, PhD. The CESP therefore must either start an MPhil or alternatively let all other centers just have an MA and PhD and drop the MPhil. So when that was the case, we had to start an MPhil. So that's the way that the academic programs began. We were in the old campus. Anjan and I used to share one office room. And then we moved to the new campus where we had the luxury of each of us having an individual office room. In between, we had gone, as Sunanda said, to the finance ministry library to gather some reports and books and so on, which they were getting rid of. And in the process, I actually got a skin infection, which has lasted me all my life. All the dust that it had acquired is something which really came on to afflict me for the rest of my life. The center got started, and I think one of the remarkable things about the center is the fact that it actually had a big impact. Now, I have often wondered why it had this big impact. I mean, of course, in the sense that you had brilliant faculty and so on, you had brilliant students, but then brilliant faculty and brilliant students don't necessarily always have that kind of an impact, particularly in the world at large. For instance, I was a student in Delhi University when the Delhi School of Economics was started, or not started, I mean, had this absolutely excellent faculty members, Utsa Sen, Shukumar Chakravarti, K.N. Raj, Tapan Rai Chaudhary, Jagdish Bhagwati, and so on, so that, why did that not take off the way that CESP took off? In the sense that they also wanted, I mean, I think that took off. Delhi School is a wonderful institution, but it took off in a different way. I think it took off in a way quite different from what those people at that time had wanted. That basically they also wanted, in some sense, to have a center that was heterodox, that was not bound by orthodoxy. But on the other hand, the Delhi School, I think, is less heterodox today than at that particular time. I remember people like Amit Sen teaching us the flaws of Solo's growth model, K.N. Raj teaching us the fact that the real balance effect was a rubbishy concept and so on. All that we were told. But on the other hand, it didn't have that kind of an impact as far as the academia in the country as a whole was concerned. And I've often wondered why. I think there were, I mean, this is not just CESP, of course, JNU as a whole, and that's a question which has always kind of, engaged me. I think one obvious thing, of course, is the fact that we had a big PhD program, which very few universities in India have. Most other universities are simply finishing schools for going abroad. You do your MA, brilliant MA courses you have, but then your best students go abroad. The fact that we actually retained our best students, the fact that we actually didn't just have a brilliant MA program, but we also had a research program that every year about 6 to 7 students would be getting their PhDs from our center. That was a big thing. I know that from Delhi School of Economics, for instance, hardly 1 or 2 per year, who would be getting PhDs, if at all that. But But this was a very big thing, having a research program and the like of which you don't find in most other Indian universities. But then that is probably not a cause as much as a symptom of the fact that something special was building up here. So when one looks at the causes, I can think of three. One, of course, is a very close relationship between the faculty and the students. When we first came here, we had all these students' hostels and faculty quarters absolutely next door to one another. And one was a bit kind of surprised, how can you have a situation where the students are so close to you? But on the other hand, I believe that that has turned out to be an excellent idea. I remember going to Orissa once to some university for a selection committee meeting. The Vice Chancellor picked me up at the airport and took me to the university. And as we entered the gate, the gatekeeper informed the Vice Chancellor that some students had gathered outside his house with complaints. So I expected that the Vice Chancellor would go to his house and meet the students. He promptly went to the guest house and telephoned the police. Now it is that kind of thing which CESP, at least the days when we were active and the days that the CESP was building up and JNU providing the ambience for that build-up, it is that kind of thing which was really quite unprecedented in other normal universities. It's this closeness, and closeness which was reflected, for instance, in the fact that we would discuss grades with students. That is again something which came as a big surprise to me. But on the other hand, I must confess that in my entire years of teaching, not one student has really pressed me for a change in grades. In the entire year, I mean, it's quite amazing. Not one student ever told me that, sir, you have given me a grade that is unfair, you please jack it up. That is what normally people's impression would be, that if you have a system like this, students would demand that, but nobody ever did. I think there is a closeness between the teachers and the students, of which inviting us is a symptom on this occasion, which I think is one of the big differences between JNU and other universities. The other difference which I find is, of course, the fact that we have this intake of people from different backgrounds. This policy of reservation, SC/ST, OBC, regional backwardness, social backwardness, income backwardness. I'm not sure if these things are happening still, but on the other hand, that in fact, one of our students you must have known of, Abhijit Banerjee, who got a Nobel Prize. He wrote somewhere, I remember reading, that the first time he met a Dalit student was when he came to JNU. That in his entire previous academic exposure, he had not come across a Dalit student. And that is a very big thing, because it not only, it also produces a cultural revolution even in the minds of the non-Dalit students to actually have that kind of admixture. Of course, it can actually be counterproductive in the sense of, if the distances continue, then you can actually have a situation where one group of students feels alienated from the others and so on. But that is where I think in JNU the other, I would say the third feature of JNU, which actually intervened, is this enormous engagement of students with politics. I think it's a wonderful example of serious student politics, students being engaged in politics, and therefore, if there are all these prejudices which divide the students, then those prejudices get overcome when the students actually are politically seriously engaged. It's really a wonderful advertisement for having campus politics of a very serious kind. These are some of the specific features of JNU which I have actually felt have always impressed me. They're so new, they're so different. And of course, talking of CSP itself, the course structure, the combination of theory with history, with empirical work on the Indian economy is something which you often don't find, you don't come across. And as a matter of fact, one of the most remarkable incidents I remember is when a student from London School of Economics came once to get admission in JNU to our, I'm forgetting, MPhil or PhD programs. We asked him why is he coming all the way to JNU from LSE, and his answer was that, look, I asked my supervisor that I want to work on Keynes, and he said, we don't do Keynes, you better go to JNU, I hear that they do Keynes. So he was a student actually all the way from LSE, and I think he was admitted and probably stayed here for a year or so. And that is something which is that kind of a mixture of different ideas, different ways of approaching economic topics, which again is quite uncommon, and I think that's one of the things that has made the center last so long, and also like a shining beacon. I think all of us who had started the center have always felt very proud of it, and I hope this pride continues well into the future. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Thank you so much, sir. As I was telling you, Professor Nayyar was caught up with some other engagement and he has to leave by 5:40.
And thank you, Praveen. At the outset, my profuse apologies for being late. I had planned to be here at 4:30, but it took me an hour and 40 minutes. The traffic jams were dreadful. Just like Prabhat said, I am grateful. I think it's a privilege to be in your midst this evening, and it's thoughtful of you to remember us. Though, may I say, I don't know how many of you overlapped with my time in JNU, but I have learned much from all of you over the years. I am seldom at a loss for words, but this evening I am. What can I say apart from trivia or gossip that might interest you or amuse you? I will do neither. There is a sentence I remember from Graham Greene's autobiography. It was called A Sort of Life. In that he had a wonderful sentence. Memory is like a long broken night. Fragments remain fragments. So what we choose to remember, in a sense, is very selective, very arbitrary. Now, I am not among the founders. I am a latecomer. My first association with CESP and JNU, believe it or not, was in the academic year 1977-78. I was on sabbatical leave from the University of Sussex and spending a year as visiting professor at the Indian Statistical Institute in Delhi. The only persons in CESP whom I knew at that time were Prabhat and Utsa, for we had been students together at Delhi and at Oxford. And JNU at that time was in the old campus, and it was its early days. If I recall correctly, I was persuaded by Sunanda to deliver 10 lectures on trade theory in the course on international trade that she taught. It was called International Trade, Investment and Payments, if I remember. Now, my first impressions of CESP and JNU were formed at that time. And its milieu, everything that Prabhat had described to perfection, had a strong resonance for me with that of the University of Sussex, where I was then, which was then the brave new world for universities and academics in Britain, particularly in the social sciences. We did not have departments, we had schools. Now, those were my first impressions of JNU. It had been established in 1969, although it began life with the students in the early 70s, I think the CESP in 1973. It was the brave new world of universities in India. And I know so many, apart from my colleagues who came to JNU at that time, like Ramila Thapar, who had this vision of what JNU should be. It set out to be different, and I think in retrospect, it succeeded in this endeavor. Its range, its size was small, both faculty and students. Students about the size of a college at the University of Delhi. Its range of disciplines was limited largely to the School of Social Sciences, Languages and International Studies. The process of admissions, which Prabhat mentioned, was different insofar as it sought to create equal opportunities for students who had not studied at established or reputed colleges or universities. In a sense, it went way beyond affirmative action. It was much more creative in establishing equal opportunities. The curriculum was innovative, so was the teaching. The semester system was a departure from the conventional academic year teaching and examination systems. Assessment was different. In the teaching programs, there was a premium, I noticed, on reading and thinking rather than learning by rote. In the assessment, there were multiple methods, while an even more important departure from normal practice was the students could come and discuss their exam scripts and grades with teachers. But just as Prabhat said, nobody ever came with a request to up their grade. It was always asking questions. How could I have done better? What's wrong with this? Now, the interaction between teachers and students was intensive. I noticed it even in that short period. And the students were a community. Now, I left, I was a bird of passage. I decided to return to India in 1980, and for 3 years I taught at IIM Calcutta before moving to Delhi, and I was economic advisor in the Ministry of Commerce in June 1983. In CESP, in early 1985, CESP advertised a professorship in economics. It was a temptation I could not resist, and I applied. The selection committee met sometime in the summer. I received a letter of appointment. Alas, the then Commerce Minister Vishwanath Pratap Singh was reluctant to let me go. He dragged his feet. And my colleagues were worried. And Utsa did, as Utsa always would, ask, do you intend to come? You remember there was an interregnum of about 6 months. So much so that the then Vice Chancellor P.N. Srivastava telephoned me and said, we are a bit worried. Do you need a house? I said, no, I have my own house. It's just that my minister is refusing to let me go. Ultimately, 3 days before VP Singh became finance minister in Rajiv Gandhi's government, he said to me, Deepak, you're free to leave. And I moved to JNU on 1st January 1986. Now, the first batches I taught were those who completed their MA in 1986 and 1987. I see Somajit and Ritin Joy sitting there. They were amongst the first students I met at JNU. I have some memories of those early days. In the School of Social Sciences, Building 1, there was no office space on the 3rd floor, which is where CESP was, and there was no room for me. So I was allotted an office on the ground floor. And about 10 days after I had joined JNU, I came to find that the Center for Historical Studies had locked me out of that office, which annoyed the then Dean, Professor C.P. Bhamri, so much that he actually vacated the Dean's office, moved back to the old campus so I could have space. That was quite amazing. The tea was undrinkable. The food was inedible. And, Francis in the canteen produced terrible food. The only person who loved it was Amal Sanyal. He gorged on those puris and aloo. Now, fortunately for Professor Bhamri, who returned to his office, unfortunately for me, my colleagues made me chair of the department, so I didn't need an office. I moved up to the 3rd floor to be with everybody. And the one thing I noticed was that everybody in JNU lived in their own homes. So they went home for lunch. But I lived far away. So I actually persuaded some and started a lunch club. And it was nice. Slowly, Krishna Bhardwaj, Arun Kumar, Satish Jain, occasionally Anjan would join us with their lunch. And it created a sense of community at lunchtime, which was very nice. The other thing I remember of that period is, maybe because I was a latecomer, I was given the 9 a.m. lecture. So I think most of you who were here then would remember my class was at 9 a.m. Now, unlike today, where it took me 1 hour and 40 minutes for a lecture at 9 a.m., I used to leave my home in Friends Colony West at 8:30. I was here at 10 to 9. I parked my car. I walked up, left my flask of water and my dabba, which was an object both of curiosity and amusement, because I always carried that water, having picked up a lousy stomach infection in Kerala. And it was, it was a period of settling in, but slowly, as I got, as I said, I knew no one. I had met Amit and Krishna fleetingly before that. Other than Prabhat and Utsa, I knew nobody. And that sense of community developed. Ultimately, not long after, we moved to the School of Social Sciences Building 2, so that all of us were on the same floor. And for the first time, perhaps, as a faculty also, not just that we had single rooms to ourselves, but also that we were in the same shared space. And I remember that arrangement was permanent. So, I had Anjan to my left, followed by Ram Prasad, and Krishna to the right, the classroom in between. And as we go down that corridor, there was Arun and there was Prabhat, and that comes back to me. We were all in a big square. Now, the teaching learning process was interactive and stimulating. I must say the milieu of contesting ideas, asking questions, all of you, was conducive to the evolution of my own thinking in terms of heterodox perspectives on macroeconomics, international economics, and development economics. Now, our institutional endeavor as a collective, and I learned the ethos quickly, was that students must become independent in their thinking and autonomous in their decisions. And that is what made JNU special. For the JNU community, students and colleagues alike, pluralism, diversity, tolerance, and secularism, human well-being, dignity, democracy, and egalitarianism were an integral part of our belief systems. Thus, independence in thinking, debating different worldviews, and a consciousness about society were all embedded in JNU's culture. It was very, very different, I must tell you, from the world outside. In a sense, it was an island unto itself. Now, the one thing I do remember, and forgive me if I intend to be truthful, the passage of time over the next 25 years that I was here changed the aspirations of our students. To begin with, many of our students chose to work in civil society and social sectors instead of the more lucrative and conventional professions. A few went abroad to do their PhDs, but many stayed. And by the way, that's what made JNU different. I can't agree more with Prabhat that we created a research tradition. And even those of our students who went abroad for PhDs kept their connect and would walk into Anjan's room, your room, my room, ask us questions, tell us about what they were doing. And, we produced PhDs after PhDs, year after year. But I can tell you, I was Vice Chancellor of the University of Delhi for 5 years. In that entire period, there were 2 PhDs in economics, 3 in sociology. So we were special. The only thing is that as the milieu of society changed, the aspirations of our students changed. And from the time when they wanted to do something from society, some of the brightest, their aspiration was to go and work in the IMF and the World Bank. It surprised me, but it happened. And then long after, just as I was about to depart, or when I came back from the University of Delhi, I noticed in placement season that all the young ladies were wearing saris. It was always jeans. People used to smoke in my class in the morning. And the men were wearing suits, and some had tilaks. That worried me. But that was, I think, a real change. And that change was much more dramatic elsewhere. Now, in a sense, I am unusual because I've lived a life in 2 worlds. the professional part of my life has been divided between academia and the public domain. The division has been unequal in time. It's 3/4 academia, 1/4 public domain. Most of my friends in academia have never understood why I left the engaging world of the classroom, ideas and creativity for the hurdy-burly of the public domain. Most of my friends in government actually never understood why I left what they believed was the power, the influence, the excitement of the public domain for the ivory tower of academia. The fact is that I enjoyed both these worlds and never thought of them as an either-or choice. I am convinced that both left me richer for the experience, which enabled me to contribute more to the other world when I returned to it. The unusual blend of theory and policy, as well as my heterodox thinking, is probably attributable to my life as an economist in these two different worlds, and it has a lot to do with what I learned from my students and colleagues in JNU. I learned about macroeconomics, international economics, development economics in the classroom as a student and as a teacher, and through research on these subjects over a lifetime. But I also learned from the experience of redesigning trade policy, rethinking industrial policy, reformulating macroeconomic policies, some in periods of crisis and reform, which enriched my understanding. Similarly, my academic understanding enabled me to think differently and out of the box, help evolve more effective, even if unconventional, approaches to public policy. I recall that in the Ministry of Finance, when we were in dire straits, borrowing $2 billion overnight in international capital markets, I didn't know where the next payment of debt servicing would come from. We thought of this idea. It occurred to me because I had read Kaleski a long time ago. The idea of imposing import margins, that if you want to import $100 worth of goods, you deposit $100 in a bank, no interest for 6 months. And that really did stifle imports when we needed to. But let me add that while I was at home in both worlds, the classroom was always my natural home. And in academia, JNU, without any doubt, was my intellectual home. Now, one last story, and I will end. The connect between my tenure in the turbulent years, 3 governments, and the worst macroeconomic crisis in independent India, and my experience at CESP had some organic connections in terms of thinking out of the box in how to manage a macroeconomic crisis that I inherited. The irony of my life is I was writing about the crisis to come when I was at JNU, negotiating with the IMF, and Amit is not here, but he was the only person who laid me a wager that I would not get money from the IMF when we had no elected government in office. I won that wager from Amit. But essentially, mortgaging gold, devaluing the rupee, averting debts on international, default on international obligations. By the way, fighting my battles in government, it was not easy for me because I had a different view. I won some, I lost some. Ultimately, I resigned as Chief Economic Advisor because of differences with the then Finance Minister Manmohan Singh and returned to JNU. Now, I fondly remember that some of my colleagues were worried about what I was doing and why I was doing it. Yet, when I returned to JNU, I remember the fond welcome from CESP students, affectionate, curious, empathetic, asking questions, coming by to see me in office, a lecture about how union budget is made, and so on. In a sense, that was JNU. That was JNU. And for me, the 1990s was my uninterrupted decade at JNU, where Yogendra Alag, when he came as Vice Chancellor, asked me to be associated with the administration. I said, absolutely not. This is my time for teaching and for research. I will not do anything. But he did us a favor. We persuaded him to bring Amit Bhaduri back, and he did it without complications or without process. Now, that period, I do remember both Rajagopal and Bache Singh, they were as much part of the CESP institution as any of us. Rajagopal would work till 7, he had a long distance to commute. He was just amazing. He was part of the CESP family, and so was Bache Singh. He was most distressed when I gave up drinking tea in 1998. Now, from JNU, I went to the University of Delhi and came back. Now, the point is, my connect with JNU did not vanish at the University of Delhi. Because everybody, I had left the University of Delhi as a student 33 years ago. I knew no one. But everyone marveled at how much I knew about the University of Delhi and its people. Guess my source. All are former students of JNU who taught at the University of Delhi. And they were described popularly as by subaltern sources. Now, there was a time it was difficult for CSP students to get appointments as lecturers in University of Delhi colleges. We changed that because University of Delhi was characterized by native son and daughter policies. Accidents happened. But when the system became impartial, the ability of JNU students got them there. And if you look at the Delhi School of Economics in the present day, a lot of them are your classmates. A lot of them are our former students. Now, let me conclude. I think the one thing that I am proud of in my association with CESP and JNU is that for 50 years, JNU has been an institution that has stood for pluralism, tolerance, secularism, and democracy. In India, even in the most difficult times, it asks questions. It speaks truth to power. The cost has been very high. We had an assault on public universities in Delhi. And it's not people have views that JNU is too left wing and therefore this government attacked it. It's not true. What worries this government about JNU is that it asks questions. It asks questions about everyone and everything. And as I look back on this half century of JNU, of which I was part for a quarter century, I think that is JNU's major contribution to democracy, economy, polity, and society in India. Just look at how good, how distinguished our alumni are. Even Mr. Modi's trusted lieutenants are former JNU students.
Thank you, sir. Now, Professor Bhaduri is online, and so is Professor Sengupta. So, may I request Professor Bhaduri now to please join us? Yes.
रिप्लेस कर दिया.
Sir, can you please connect your audio first and unmute? Rohit is calling.
organizing this session and inviting us oldies. It has been wonderful to meet students that one taught 25 years ago or more. And this occasion has reminded one very forcibly of how ancient some of us are. I mean, 50 years is a long time, and how young we were when we joined the center. You know, when Krishna Bharadwaj used to be our neighbor in Cambridge, when Prabhat was a lecturer there, so we were actually neighbors. Lived in flats provided by Clare College, very ramshackle flats. That's where we first made her acquaintance.
Hello.
And she recruited us to CESP, and it was a very inviting prospect because we had, she said that we would have complete freedom to design our own courses. So this was a department which was starting from scratch. It carried no prior baggage at all in terms of earlier faculty, earlier course structures that we had to adhere to. And that was what was quite exciting for us. And that is what convinced us really when we came back to India to join CESP under Krishna's guidance. Now, a little bit of history about our own background may be in order. You see, both Deepak, Rohini, who later married Deepak, Prabhat and I studied for MA at Delhi School of Economics. In fact, Deepak, Rohini and I were batchmates in DSC. We did our MA, finished our MA in 67. Imagine, that long ago, 1967. And of course, those days you didn't have 10 plus. So you finished your BA course, you joined the BA course when you were 16, and you finished your MA by the time you were 21. And I finished my PhD by the time I was 25, getting on to 26. So you can't think of doing that now with the additional 2 years of schooling that people have. But anyway, in the Delhi School of Economics, as Prabhat has mentioned, there was an absolutely brilliant galaxy of teachers that we had. We had Sukumar Chakraborty, Sunanda Sen, K.N. Raj teaching us. There was a strong economic history department also, Tapan Rai Chaudhary and Om Prakash. And I'm leaving out all the professors before that. Don't think I'm being disrespectful. I respected them all very much. And of course, Dharma Kumar. And our professors taught us what they were most interested in, of course, as we taught our students what we were most interested in and the topics we were working on. And at one level, it was quite exciting because one felt one was on the cutting edge of the economics discipline. I took, for example, mathematical economics with Professor Chakraborty, and I did advanced economic theory with Professor Sunanda Sen. Some of you would find that difficult to believe, perhaps, given my subsequent career. But you know, at some level, it was quite exciting to me to know what n-dimensional vector spaces were, or what the Kakutani theorem was. But then we started feeling, some of us started feeling a little uneasy. We thought that really there was no connect with what was being taught to us, exciting though it was at one level, and with the world we were living in. And so many exciting things were happening in the Indian economy, in the world at large, and we simply did not know how to deal with it or analyze it. So I and a fellow student, Joseph Perez, actually organized a kind of mini rebellion within Delhi School. We asked our teachers to meet us so that we could discuss the courses and tell them what we found, a little unsatisfactory. Joseph Perez later on, of course, left economics completely. I think he got quite disgusted. He became a philosopher, a very well-known philosopher abroad. Unfortunately, he passed away quite recently. Joseph Prabhu is what he was known by abroad, not Joseph Perez. And our teachers chickened out. Ultimately, they kept postponing the meeting and we never got to meet them to discuss our problems. Now, I sometimes wonder whether there was some kind of incipient rebellion brewing among CESP students that we never got to hear about? Or was it all hunky-dory? Were you all satisfied with what we taught? I know one or two of our students who went abroad later said that, oh, we were taught absolute crap in CESP. In Stanford and Harvard is very different. And they preferred Stanford or Harvard probably to what they'd been taught, So there was a kind of counter-revolution in theory that they underwent. So that is something I would like to know about. Because despite the close relationship we had with our students, I don't think they were very forthcoming when it came to criticizing their professors. Or criticizing in a nice, polite way. I don't mean that it should be very aggressive, but telling us where we fell short. What is it that they would have, what are the topics they would have liked to have seen us cover, but we did not actually think of teaching them. That would have been very useful. And I think that would be useful even today. Now getting back to how young we were, 4 out of the 6 founders of CESP, we were 27 years old when we joined. And we just turned 28. Anjan and I in July of 1973, and Prabhat 2 months after that. So you can imagine that we were not very much older than the graduate students in JNU at that time. And I remember actually Arun Kumar here, who looks like a wise sage now, yes, all advice. I remember that he was a charming young, completely clean-shaven young man, just back from the United States. He had been doing some kind of science or technical course there, and he had decided to shift to economics. I remember interviewing him for the MA admission, it was, I forget which year it was, for PhD admission, sorry, not MA, PhD admission. So he would be able to remember better which year was 77, as long ago, just 4 years after we started CESP. So yes, there are a lot of memories. One of the facts nobody has mentioned is that the early CESP was very heavily bombed. Out of the 6 faculty members, 4 were Bengalis, and Prabhat, of course, since he reads Bengali and speaks Bengali, he's a half Bengali. Sorry? No, not okay, honorary Bengali. So that is something he would dispute, very bitterly. But when he's asked to go and give a speech in some small place in Dibrugarh, he went recently, they always say, please speak to us in Bengali. And he does, he talks in Bengali to them, he gives the lecture in Bengali. So, later on, I think this regional bias reduced a little bit as more faculty members joined us. Deepak joined us, Sheila Bhalla joined us very soon, Abhinay Bhatt joined us, and so on. But in more recent years, I think this bomb dominance has again reasserted itself, as far as I can see, in CESP in a very big way. So, getting back to what was so attractive for us and why we chose to join CESP on our return after doing a doctorate abroad, that is the freedom to do our own courses, to design our own courses, and so on. You see, Krishna Bharadwaj had a very clear vision of a very clear academic vision of what the course structure should look like. It is not that we ever wanted to supplant the regular conventional courses on macroeconomics, microeconomics, etc. that were taught in all universities, but rather we wanted to supplement these courses by additional courses which would focus on the analysis on 3 broad areas. On the analysis of the Indian economy in particular, which had been grossly neglected as far as our own MA education was concerned. On economic history. Economic history, again, I think is something that, not only development economists, but anyone who teaches economics, even of a very abstract theoretical nature, should be aware of the economic history of their own country and to a certain extent of the history of the development of capitalism. And thirdly, she was also very conscious of imparting to students the knowledge that economic theories are not born in a vacuum and they're not relevant for all time. Which economic theories come to prominence really is very largely shaped by the political and economic conditions of the time. And this is so very true. I know that for most of my academic life, I had the impression, which was very widespread among so-called radical economists in India and abroad, that it was neoclassical economics which was the problem, that classical economics was fine, and so on. And gradually, as I started teaching my own courses, and by the way, Krishna also had this idea, which was so very true, that teaching and research go together. It is only in the course of teaching, interacting with students, that new research areas open up and you get insights into existing research areas. And for that, of course, the student participation is very essential. And this is where, as Deepak also mentioned, JNU was very different, CESP was very different. Students were not shy about being vocal, about asking questions, or even disagreeing with their teachers on occasion. I know that some of my students were horrified when I started criticizing Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage, and they made it very clear to me that they were quite horrified at the idea until they got used to it. So, yes, in the course of teaching itself, a whole new set of research areas open up to the teacher. So it's really a process of very fruitful interaction. Students may have learned something from me, but I have also learned a lot from students. And the other aspect of JNU that people have mentioned, that is its inclusive character, its conscious attempt to include people from deprived economic and social backgrounds, that was also very important for the learning process of the teachers themselves. There used to be a scheme, unfortunately I think it has been discontinued, where you had teacher fellowships. Teachers who had been teaching in small colleges and universities, in relatively remote areas, could take time off, and the UGC had this teacher fellowship scheme where they could take off 2 years and come and do a PhD. And we had 2 teacher fellows in our center. Actually, both of them did their PhDs with me, and they were not much younger than I was, because this was in the early years. I'm told that the scheme has been discontinued. And the student from whom I learned the most, because she opened up a whole new world to me, was Shamala, who was from the Lambada community in Andhra Pradesh. Now she, at the age of 18, used to work as a daily wage laborer in the fields, earning daily wages. Now where else, apart from JNU, would you get a situation where somebody who is a daily wage laborer could actually aspire to do a PhD? It was a wonderful system we had, and I'm very sorry it has been discontinued. Some of the faculty were a little doubtful. She had done her MA elsewhere, and those days we had direct PhD, we did not have MPhil, and they said that, coming from such a background where she has not been taught any, ancient economics or any of the things that our students have been taught, how is she going to do a PhD? So I said, don't worry, she will write a marvelous PhD because she knows more about the tribal economy, her own tribal economy, than anybody else does. And in fact, she did. She wrote a thesis, put in very hard work, involving field work in her own community, and her examiners were very impressed, and they said that the thesis should be published. So this is just a personal example I'm giving of what JNU was, and why it produced, as Deepak says, the kind of students that it did. By the way, I had also a very personal benefit from interacting with a tribal student from Andhra, and that is not very frequently, but occasionally, and this is something I can tell you now that I'm no longer teaching. She would bring me a white plastic jerry can full of mahua liquor, and she would say, "Madam, this is pure, it's not adulterated. My father has made it specially for you." And what I thought was an amazing good Okay, so let me stop there. There are other speakers, at least 2 other speakers. And thank you again, it has been a marvelous experience interacting with you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Can we, Rohit, try and reach Professor Bhaduri now?
Well, I think when I thought of speaking in this, our 50th year of remembering old times, the first thing that came to my mind is like,
Sir, can you please
revisiting the city in which you were born. It's almost like revisiting the city you were born. Memories come back, some good, some not so good, some bad. But nevertheless, they are kind of affinity with it. But you will not cross the same river. And I have tried to cross the JNU river many times. I came, I joined, I left, and I came back and so on. But there are certain parts of the day, setting up the JNU Center, I think which you may not have known. And that is before regular teaching or the regular debate started. Krishna had already joined. She was in the regional development, Center for Regional Development, where Muniz Raza was the head of the department. And she was, as an economist, she was in that department. And I think before me, the only other person that joined was Anjan. And Anjan just come back after having finished his PhD in general equilibrium theory in sort of what is called mathematical economics. And I think while he had got the appointment, it was not very clear where he was joining, if I remember correctly. And then Parthasarathi called me and said, we will offer you a job, but it will be when the economic center begins. And at that time, I was staying with Raj in Trivandrum, and Raj told me, why are you leaving? I said, it is a good idea. I wanted to go back to Delhi for personal reasons, plus the fact that it was a new center. JNU was not my first teaching job in Delhi. JNU was my second job because I had already worked a year and a half in Delhi School of Economics. I was the first one to join when Delhi School of Economics was very alive, and I was also the first one to leave after about a year. Now, the thing that struck me in the prehistory of the center, of setting up the center, was Krishna used to live on one side of House Khas and I used to live on the other side of House Khas. And a couple of times we met and we did not discuss the department, how to set up the center, and it was not at all clear the center was going to be set up. I was pleased to have a job in Delhi, and I think Krishna was happy to be in Delhi and was hoping that I was working in the regional development. When we started, it was like sleepwalking. At least for me, it was like sleepwalking. I knew we wanted to do something which was different from typical economic centers, like what was being done, which was really the most well-known center at that time, the Delhi School of Economics. But I did not quite know what we wanted. I certainly did not know. I think Krishna was much more dedicated to SAFA, and that demand-supply equilibrium economics is not what we are really put on. But macroeconomics was not her thing. Was not really something on which she had very clear views. And this is when things began to gel. Because she was somebody who was interested in classical economics and into economics teaching. I was basically interested in a kind of mixture of Marx, Kalecki and Keynes, but didn't quite know. And during the process of teaching, it became clearer to me. Anjan was teaching general equilibrium theory, about which I had read certain things, we had to make exams and so on. But really it was not my field, except for Frank Khan was my teacher. I was much more interested in mathematics and mathematical economics. But anyway, after we started, I think it will be not totally honest to ourselves if we don't say that there was always a kind of difference in economics. There was one group which really believed in taking economics mostly through history and theory, more or less in literary form. And there was another group which believed that unless you tightened it enough to give it a kind of formal shape, it was not really quite theory. Very simply, but I think this difference was good. I was somewhere in between, and I partially agreed with this side, partially with that side, and basically nobody agreed with me. This was the form in which we started the JNU Center, and then of course when other people joined, gradually, I started taking shape. Prabhat Patnaik joined, this was came from Sunanda Sen joined, and I think the center, Deepak joined, and the center, when there was, who is no longer with, who is no longer here, D.N. Rao joined, and this was basically the group which shaped what was taught as economics in JNU. Now, I think it is what we taught was, looking back, I think what we taught was different, but what we taught was not very coherent. I think what we taught did not really fully give an understanding of the complexity of the subject and different ways of approaching it. And I think this is something which I have not seen anywhere, but I think it was in other really prominent schools, or schools where sort of economics which shape modern economics, good, bad, or whatever it is. In those schools, they had much more trust. I think we were not. I can personally say about myself, I was not good enough. I don't think most of us were up to the challenge to really strike out on a completely different path. So, the basic thing which defines a subject, or defines a way of approaching a subject, and I'll say this very clearly, of approaching a subject and doing something really new is different which you are teaching. And what is different which you are teaching, I think, in my case certainly kept on shifting, and I think the center also was not that clear that the core difference which we had. When that was the first round in the mid-80s, when I was from mid-70s to mid-80s when I was teaching. Then I left JNU, actually I resigned for JNU, and I came back many years later. The Dada, who is no longer there, the Vice Chancellor, he invited me and Rajaraman in physics to join back the university, So we joined back, I joined back, and then I had still less idea, and personally I had still less idea of what kind of economics is going to watch. In the meantime, I had taught in many universities outside, and so I'd seen the differences, but I was not really sure. I was sure what should not be taught. I was sure that what Stanford was teaching was not what we did. I was sure that what Olivia Mekib was teaching was not what we wanted to teach. We wanted to teach something, in my mind even today, what we wanted to teach was something which is analytically much sharper. And at the same time, which does not lose the sense of history, importance of events, which which is not a sort of regular history, but comes as changes what is called the Black Swan episode in history, and that kind of thing. I don't think this exists, but I think bigger universities have made very many specialized people with different interests who sort of do their own thing and in the process improve something. Our department, at least so long as I was there, was not there. And there was one thing in which we never succeeded in doing anything particularly, because unfortunately Amit Bhaduri died. I did not know him, I mean I knew him a little bit, but I did not know him personally. But from that, I don't think there was anybody who was really doing, I may be wrong, but I think who was doing statistical or theory, Bayesian or otherwise, economics, statistics, and trying to apply that sort of thing to economics. And to see how, there was a very difficult problem here. That is, if you are doing empirical work, you must realize that the data with which you work is much cruder. With time series, apart from the real problem of time series in India the data is quite hopelessly inadequate. And on the other hand, if you are working with either other kind of data, or if you are trying to work with panel data and so on, this really in the Indian context is not quite possible. And that is why I think our empirical economic or quantitative economics work really did not show any clear pattern or any clear way in which economics should be taught. This was, I think, much better done in Delhi school. We were much better in history than in economic history. We were much better in certain kinds of economics, in general equilibrium theory, macroeconomics, so on and so forth. But I think that is when people, and many of whom were students, later teachers, many of whom are here. But I think like everything else, as you don't cross the street twice, the thing has changed. In the meantime, political earthquakes have taken place so far as JNU is concerned. And I do not know about JNU. I have actually no contact with it. My room looked up and I have never been back from, I don't know, 2006, 2007, I have never been back to the JNU. I haven't been able to enter the room. And that's it. So I would not say anything about now, but I think our reminiscence is, the best part of my reminiscence of JNU is the prehistory of JNU. When we did not know what we are doing, we were very young, but we did not want to repeat Cambridge. We did not, and that I was absolutely sure. We did not want to repeat Delhi School of Economics, which I knew, and I did not want to repeat Presidency College Calcutta, which I knew, which was very good in theory at an undergraduate level, and very bad in things like Indian economy, in the sense of Indian problems. So altogether, I know what I did not want, but I did not know what we managed to do. I don't think we managed to do very much, but we managed to do something. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is Professor Sengupta on? Okay. So, and what about Professor Jain? May not be. Vishwajit?
So thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting and for being present for this occasion, the 50th year of CESP. For me, it's been a long journey. I'd say that my formative years have been here. What I am is because of CESP. As some of you know, I came from physics into economics. I was doing a PhD in physics and then I switched. I did rural development for a year before I joined economics. When I was doing rural development, I realized our background of social sciences is very weak and therefore we would not be able to help at all. So this was at Kishore Bharti in Madhya Pradesh in 76, 77. And then I decided I should learn economics because at Kishore Bharti I learned how important economics is for the really poor in the villages, how difficult the life of the poor is in the villages. And we knew nothing. We were all scientists there at Kishore Bharti. We were trying to do good, but not succeeding. The landlord in the area was against us. The bureaucracy was against us there. The science teaching experiment was floundering. So, there's a problem there. So I decided to learn some economics on my own. Fortunately, my father, who was teaching in Allahabad University Political Science, had some friends who were economists, and they suggested some books like Eric Roll and Leo Haberman and Samuelson and a few other books like that. So without really knowing very much economics, I applied to the CESP for admission to the PhD program. Fortunately, those days you could come directly into the PhD program even if you didn't have a master's in the subject. That kind of leeway doesn't exist anymore, but was there, and I was a beneficiary of that. I very soon realized that CESP was interested in taking me. How did I realize that? I realized it because, in the entrance exam, the topic that I had given as the topic I wanted to work in was one of the questions. So I could answer it very well, and I managed to get admission into the CESP. And as Professor Anjan Mukherjee and Utsa Patnaik was saying, there was an interview. Now at the interview also, Professor Ramshad Singh Gupta started asking me how to multiply matrices, and Anjan Mukherjee quickly shut him down. He sort of realized that was a question that I could probably easily answer, having come from physics and so on. So they gave me admission. Now, having given me admission and joining CESP, I realized that the student body here was very different. So my argument is that why CESP is done well is because of the liberality of the faculty and also the student body. The student body then was very alive. As Professor Jayati Ghosh mentioned, the student body is the kind of student body I had not seen in India in any other university. Soon after I joined, this was after the emergency, and there was the issue of guilty 4 because many students during the emergency had got arrested, and therefore the students were protesting and they wanted the removal of the top 4 people in the university. So they wanted these 4 people to be removed. And that wasn't happening. The government wasn't willing to do that. So there was a long strike. This, I think, lasted for 2 months or maybe even 3 months. So the semester started and then suddenly it all folded up. Now the students also realized that the university would probably shut down the library. So they captured the library. The library was being run then by the students for those 3 months. And as it would be, there was not one single book that was lost. That's what the librarian said at the end. So the students managed the library. And we who were supposed to be PhD students, we started taking classes for the MA students. Now, I was new, but I had a few lectures from Professor Bhaduri earlier. So we started teaching some of the students, to sort of show that we were academically oriented. Now you can imagine, actually the administration, really did not want the police to enter. So there were times when the police was standing around the campus, and once I remember Professor Mahale was the rector, he went out because the police had started shooting, tear gas shells, and we were all in the library and we had to get out of the library to, see what was going on. So the police started throwing stones at Professor Mahale. Who was the rector, and he had to rush in. That angered the students. So students started also pelting stones at the police. But then Professor Mahale calmed everybody down and we went in. But anyway, the point is that the student body behaved in a very responsible manner. At that point of time, we continued classes in some form. We continued the library because, as you know, the library is a tradition. I mean, unlike in Delhi University, where I used to see when I was doing my MSc there, that the 1 month before the exam, the library is packed. Else, it was all empty. But in JNU, the library was always used. So that is a different tradition here that you did. Also, at that time, if you people weren't there, very few people were there. People took the civil service exams, but they didn't tell that they were taking civil service exams. It was done very secretively, So in 1981, I think it was, that the poster came up in the library board saying civil service exam papers available. And there's a huge uproar, that obviously, it meant that slowly it was seeping in, that civil services was becoming acceptable in the university. But to slightly go back, I was very lucky because the faculty was very liberal. So while doing my PhD, I did my MA courses. I also was allowed the leeway to do other things. Like for instance, I studied the sugar industry. I went to the Agricultural Labour Association in Ahmedabad, which gave me a sense of what was happening in the rural areas in Gujarat. All that came in very useful for my PhD. I also understood, from the sugar industry, how the black economy was affecting the industry. That was the beginning of my introduction to what I have been researching for the last 45, 50 years. That the black economy is a key in India. Without understanding the black economy, it's difficult to understand the Indian economy. And coming from physics, to me, data was very important. In physics, you always have error bars. There's a point and you have an error bar around it. But in economics, there are no error bars. So if we say 6.2, then somebody says 6.1 and 6.3, actually there's really no difference. So from that, I realized that the data of the Indian economy is in terrible shape. It's not what it should be. The kind of results that we should get empirically, they don't really match up to what they should be. So, I did my PhD. I got some papers published. I had a paper in the on conflict model. Caldor. I sort of advanced that idea, and then Professor Bhaduri said he was my thesis advisor. Send it to Cambridge Journal of Economics. So I sent it there. They wrote back saying it's very mathematical, we don't publish mathematical papers. They suggested send it to Economic Journal. I sent it to Economic Journal. They said, no, we can't publish it. Then I sent it to Journal of Post-Keynesian Economics, and a year or year and a half went by like this. Journal of Post-Keynesian Economics suggested some minor changes. By then I got fed up. I said, no, I'm not going to publish it. So that paper, JPK wrote back to me saying, why not sending the paper? I said, sorry, I'm not interested in publishing it in this way. So I never got that paper published. But the point is the faculty allowed me the leeway to do what I wanted to do. And I think that's the important difference. The students are allowed to do very substantially, PhD students, if they have ideas, they can do that. So after that, as soon as I finished my PhD, I joined National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, because they had a study on black economy from the Central Board of Direct Taxes. And I had already done some work on black economy, I had published some work on black economy, so they took me on. And then I did much more intensive work, and I realized that black economy is the area that needs to be researched, and very few people are really researching it. So 2 years later, when a post came up in JNU, I came back to JNU as a faculty member. And the first day I remember going with Anjan and Amal to the dhaba when I joined here, and they said, what are you planning to do? So I told them black economy, and they were a bit surprised, that is black economy really an area to study? But I felt that that was the area to study because that linked up to macro and micro and data, etc. So the liberality of the faculty, the autonomy that it gave to the faculty of and I was a very young person. I sort of just started my career in economics in a sense. I could be pressurized, I could feel pressure if they sort of frowned on it. but they didn't. They allowed me to do that. Also, there was one other thing that I felt was when I joined, as was said by earlier speaker, the teacher-student relationship, the SFC and so on, it was a very close relationship. So we could talk to the faculty and say, say like at the time of admissions, the SFC is active. So we could discuss with the faculty what needs to be done. When I joined, I realized that there were students who were weak, and like Utsa mentioned, Shamla, she was struggling. So we mounted some classes for her. We decided that we should have tutorials also. So I started tutoring the maths course which Anjan was teaching at that point of time, and slowly the tutor system came. Ramshad Sen Gupta was in the steel chair, and he had a project from BICP for studying steel, and he had a kettle. So it gave us the idea that we could start a coffee club, where faculty members and PhD students could get together, we could exchange ideas and so on. So we started a coffee club with Bache Singh was there, and Bache Singh used to prepare the coffee and give it to us. So this coffee club, interaction, and so on, that sort of strengthened. And when I came back, we revived the coffee club again. The coffee club had sort of ceased. So we fixed the time from 11:15 to 11:15 in the morning, and we fixed the time 3:45 to 4:15, so people could finish their lecture, come back and have coffee, and we could sit together. So this coffee club was very successful in bringing the faculty together, and we had a lot of interesting discussions at that time and so on. But this computers coming, that spoiled the fun. Because then slowly, as everybody got computers in their room, people wanted coffee in the room itself. So this idea that we'd sit together, we'd discuss and so on, that sort of slowly declined. But it's interesting, the first computer came in, I think 1987, and there was a room allotted. And I remember Satish, Krishna and all, I had learned Multimate at that point of time, which was a software at that time, which nobody hears of now. Lotus, Multimate and all that, and I taught that to Satish and to Krishna and so on also. And we tried to run it 24 hours. I said, it should be run 24 hours. People should have access to it. So we made keys, which people could go and enter any time. And next year onward, even the students were allowed. First year the students were not allowed. Then the students could also come in and do that. So the idea was to have a liberal environment in the center where the students and the faculty could interact. The students could have the facilities of having computers and so on all the time. So there was only one computer to begin with, so there had to be sharing of the computer between the students and the faculty, and so on and so forth. But I had in the meanwhile also started doing work on alternatives basically. And for that, we set up a group and a lot of students helped. So when the new economic policies came, we started having seminars on the new economic policies, and then I thought of the alternate budget as a means to propose what kind of alternative. And I went to do that alternate budget. Roughly we had about 20 students who are helping. So I allotted 2 students each 10 different sectors, and they put out results for that. So the students were also very excited about the alternative budget and so on. But the interesting thing was, at no point did the faculty try and come in the way of either these alternate budgets, or then there was the alternate economic survey that we used to bring out for roughly about 20 years, or the black economy work which nobody else was doing. So there was that liberality. And I think that liberality is what I think made the center what it was. The autonomy that it gave its faculty members. You could pursue whatever you wanted. Even if somebody disagreed with what you were doing, they wouldn't come in the way of what you were doing. So autonomy is what actually enables intellectual curiosity to be fulfilled, intellectual development of the individual faculty members. That is very, very important. And I think that is what went also into the PhD program. Because the PhD students also had the freedom to choose what they wanted to do. So we would ask the students, what is the area they want to work in, and then, we try and see what faculty members. And later on, of course, they could choose a faculty member also. So the area that they wanted to work in, the faculty member they wanted to work in, it wasn't as if you just allotted faculty to the students and that they had to work with that faculty member. So the liberality that was there in the faculty, the liberality that was allowed to the students, that was very important. I also remember, I was active in the Teachers Association because I felt that the teachers have to create an environment in the university. So from the side of the Teachers Association, we did a lot of seminars and so on. I became the president of the Teachers Association in 2014, and we tried to move for various kinds of reforms at that point of time. Unfortunately, the bureaucracy is very strong. The bureaucracy stymies anytime you want to make changes. So for instance, faculty members had to go to the bureaucracy to talk about leave or talk about housing or talk about other things, that their forms, etc. So we said, let's have a citizen charter where the administration has to tell us in how many days they respond to what we wanted, whether it be housing, leave or whatever. That the bureaucracy stymied, didn't allow that to happen. But otherwise, we were hoping that the faculty would be relieved of this idea that they have to keep going to the administration to get things done. So in other words, there are a lot of institutional changes that were brought about by the faculty, by the students, and their pressure on the bureaucracy in the university to change things, to make it more liberal than what it was. But at the end of the day, what I remember is that I had complete autonomy, whether as a student or as a faculty member, and I attribute that to my growth in JNU and to the research that I did. Fortunately, soon after I retired, the demonetization came, and I had been researching black economy for 40 years. And so I could very quickly tell what was likely to happen, why demonetization was not going to succeed. And then the GST came, and that was part of my research on public finance, why GST was the wrong thing to do in the Indian context, So luckily for me, post-retirement also I've continued to be active, because the areas that I researched for 40 years were the areas that were coming up in public policy. Thanks very much for your patience.
Thank you, sir. Is there some way of finding out if Professor Sen is available now? Very, very caring faculty members, distinguished professors. So you have a few minutes in case you have some questions and so on. Anything. Interact informally, okay. I mean, they're not, you're not too intimidated, right? Okay. You have a question. All right. So there's a mic, please, or whatever, observation.
Thank you for everything. I think you speak for everybody, for everything always. If you could tell us some funny incident, it would be very nice to share very good stuff which is really amazing for us to think about, thinking, and all that. Some funny story or something that maybe you share, sort of more fun. Some funny stories, man. Very funny. Very funny.
I think I could.
I'm sure Sunanda Sen would not mind, but she has always been quite absent-minded, but very thoughtful and solicitous of the welfare of students. So once when we were interviewing some students, we used to have interviews, or maybe it was direct PhD interview. So, cups of tea had come in. One cup of tea was also placed in front of the student who was doing the interview. So the student was too nervous to drink it. It was getting cold. So Sunanda Sen decided to cover it, to keep it hot. So she picked up an ashtray, and with a sweet smile on her face, she upturned that ashtray of tea. She doesn't remember, but we know. So this is a typical typical Shurandini kind of story.
Can I just add a little?
Please.
I had the fortune of being the Professor Prabhat Patnaik student from 76 to 78. And one of the courses he did was Theories of Imperialism in the 4th semester. And that was the time when people from other centers and schools could come to attend. And this class was very full to start with. And one of the lines that Professor Patnaik used to use is, "Am I making myself clear?" That's not all. So there used to be in the canteen a poster called the fish pond. And Professor Patnaik started off with high floor maths, and which scared off all the students from the other schools. So the fish pond, I still remember that story. Are you sure you want to do this course? Shan't you suffer from pangs of remorse? Students are such a bore, I fear. Am I making myself clear?
For the benefit of everyone here, if you can please also introduce yourself, apart from your badge.
I'm Aditya Keshwar. I was a student in MA from 96 to 78.
Thank you very much.
Sonali Gar, 89 to 91.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonali. Anyone else who would like to come in? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Bhavna. I'm from the 2003 to 2005 batch, MA. So I have one incident that I think characterized JNU for me. I was coming in from Lady Shriram College, Eco Honours, to MA Economics in JNU. And we were used to having reading lists given to us in Delhi University. And my first question to Professor Utsa Patnaik ma'am was, after a lecture was, "So what are the readings for this?" And she pointed in the direction of the library and she said, "That." Go figure out. So this, I think, really iconized JNU for me.
I'm Pradeep Keshri. This is regarding my interview for joining JNU. I appeared for the interview, but before that, my story that I did not know how to talk in English, and my English was very poor actually, writing was very poor. So I told that I want to appear for interview, but I will speak in Hindi. So Professor Anjan Mukherjee and Professor Utsa Patnaik were there. So Professor Utsa Patnaik asked me, have you heard of disguise unemployment? I said, yes, प्रचंड बेरोजगारी मुझे पता है. तो she asked what is that actually? And I said, उसमें लेबर की सीमांत उत्पादकता की दर 0 होती है. She said, what? So then I tried to correct myself. Okay, marginal productivity. So that sounds very funny thing. After Anjan Mukherjee asked something on mathematics, and I immediately answered without even writing. So he was very impressed. Perhaps I was taken. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Harish. I teach at the University, at a college in Delhi University. I was a student here 86, 88. Small thing, this is one person who's not here, Satish Jain, and this is regarding, there were 2 of us who were his students in his course in social choice theory. One was Amit Dasgupta, also not here, a brilliant person he was, and there were just 2 of us, and we were sitting in the room in the lecture theatre doing the exam, and Satish walks in 2.5 hours into the paper and says, "Kahan pahunche?" And he said, kahin nahi. So he said, do you need more time? Will it work? I don't think it will work. I think you've reached a saturation point. So you should submit your papers and go. So he said, but you know, we get a 0 in this. So he said, nahi, wo baad mein baat karte hain, and he takes the papers and it's over. And then the evening he contacts us and tells us that Sunday को मेरे घर आ जाना, ठीक है, और वहाँ बैठ के पेपर करना है, ठीक है. So the same scripts were there on his dining table. Satish was sleeping, and we were both told to come into the house. The papers will be there. There will be a cup of tea there, so you can start working. Satish wakes up at 12 o'clock and asks us, have you reached somewhere? And that's how it went. He just later confirmed that some of the problems that he had set in the paper were things that he was himself dealing with, and it would be very helpful if we had made some notes in it. So that was GNU, and that was what it was. A really lovely time we had.
Yes, if you want to come in, please feel free. Otherwise, we can close this session and you can interact informally with all our professors. Yeah.
For a group photograph, because you won't get a constellation such as this. So what we can do perhaps is to have them here. Some people can come at the back, some on the stage, and some there. Whoever, I think everybody can fit, because nowhere else will we be able to manage so many people. Hopefully we will, so we'll take like that. तो बारात हो जाएगा.
But
yeah.
But Rohit, before we go for the photo session, let us give them the warmest possible applause.
So you can take the full thing, right? And from there, आ जाएगा ना? Zoom में, हाँ, आराम से कर लीजिएगा, और whoever wants to come can come and join.
Saurabh, बैठ जाओ. प्रेम.
Request for you.
Next batch.
There is no next batch. This is the batch.
Covering Utsa.
Subbu sir wants exclusive rights.
Yeah, absolutely. We have the pioneers also, you see.
Saurabh, battery de. Battery.
संजय भाई
Stop कर दे.
2, 3. Okay, thank you.
So you're all requested to please join us for dinner, which is outside. Thank you.
हम लोग